comrades and friends. It is entirely possible that we are at the beginning of what could be the most serious and consequential economic and political world crisis that our party and the working class has ever faced. I underscore that I said possible and could, because there is no way of stating emphatically that that is the case. But the potential magnitude of what is happening as we speak with the economy, and of course its intersection with COVID-19, is unprecedented and extraordinary and historical. There's the expression, uncharted waters, you know. They shouldn't be so uncharted for revolutionary Marxists who have any grasp of theory, because in many ways we saw this coming, or should have seen it coming, and should have been preparing for it. I speak in general, not just about the party. But our movement, even the vanguard, has been ideologically weak, and therefore not preparing for it, thinking that things pretty much go along the same way they've been going. Comrade Deirdre, in addition to her remarks this evening, wrote an excellent article for the paper. And I not only recommend it, I think it's required reading for every comrade and people who take our party serious, because there's a whole lot of discussion about the events. It's all over the internet, it's all over the bourgeois media, all over Facebook, and you hear this and you hear that, and you know, the ruling class is divided, but it has its own line, and you know, in this period, we will be searching for clarity. You know, what's going on? What's the political significance? What does it mean for the class struggle? And indeed, it will be hard to grasp that unless revolutionaries and progressive people have a serious interest in doing so. And if we don't, there'll be a lot of confusion, and confusion can only benefit the ruling class, the capitalist ruling class. Deirdre is so right about a number of aspects of this, but this one in particular. Of course, the main thing on everyone's mind right now is the coronavirus and the enormous impact that that's having on society. The fear, the measures that are being taken, either on a personal level or on a governmental level or on a world level, which is really how it should be coordinated. But capitalism as a system is an anathema to that, because you have all the imperialists fighting with each other. And even if they're nice people, their system dictates that they not coordinate because they're competing. You know, this is part of the anarchy and bankruptcy of world imperialism and world capitalism. And I think that will be becoming clearer and clearer as this plays out. But I don't want to comment on what may be the most present aspect, that is the coronavirus, which, I mean, they're closing down things, you know, We're not supposed to have assemblies of larger than 500 people. At least that was the last thing I heard about New York. You know, Broadway's closing, you know. I'm speaking to a room full of, you know, New York people. I don't mean to offend anybody who's listening from outside of New York. I'm sure you're up on, you know, whatever your governor or your mayor is saying. I want to concentrate on the economic crisis. Deirdre's so right that while the virus is an enormous catalyst and has had a huge impact on the global economy for many, many reasons, still that's not the underlying reason for the financial collapse on Wall Street. It's not. It is the catalyst. It's as if the system was waiting for something, be it a war, be it a political development, be it a bank failing, or a country going into debt. It was waiting for something to unravel what is waiting to be unraveled, and that is, you know, the massive overproduction, a financial system that has been on life support since '08, when there was the big world financial crisis, and the central banks and the ruling classes all around the world were so frightened by the prospect of a collapse of the entire capitalist economy that they avowed, you know, and agreed with each other that they'll do any and everything, including taking the workers' money by the trillions and pumping it into the financial markets. But that's a phony remedy, and it runs out of steam, and it has run out of steam. And we're seeing that now. When they had to halt trading earlier today in the financial markets, because I think that the major markets fell more than 7%. And this is the second time they've done this in a few days. That's when the Federal Reserve had an emergency meeting, and as Deirdre said, released in a statement that they were going to pump $1.5 trillion starting tomorrow into the markets. As Deirdre said, that didn't stop the collapse. But there were other things that the Federal Reserve had in mind. They're in touch with all the central bankers. They're in touch with, you know, the CEOs of Morgan, of Citibank, of Bank of America, of, you know, and Christine Lagarde, and, you know, and all around the world. And they're, believe me, they're huddling in a panic. And what they're trying to do is to prevent a worldwide crash of the market and of the capitalist economy. Bankruptcies, not just of small companies and medium-sized companies, but big multinational companies, and even bank failures. Banks are supposed to be so quote-unquote solvent. That's not true. That's just on the surface. In reality, you know, there's so much debt in the market that everything associated with the financial markets is swimming in debt. You can't see it because they've been hiding it, but you're going to begin to see it. You know, I think perhaps more so than we did even 12 years ago during the '08 crisis. You're going to hear the word recession. They've been trying to run away from that. We're avoiding it. Well, maybe maybe Europe's going into it. Maybe the developing countries are going into it, but not here in the U.S. Well, you're going to hear them predicting a recession. I say recession with a grain of salt, not because that's too severe. I think it's not severe enough. I think that we're potentially going into a countrywide and world crisis that really can't be properly defined by the word a recession. It's coming at the end stage of capitalist historic development. And there has to be a better, a more accurate, a more truthful definition of what is happening. And it may very well be the biggest crisis that the world has ever seen. Again, a preliminary thought that needs to be supported by developments. They've got another problem, the world ruling class, the imperialist ruling class. I alluded to it a little earlier, I think. 12 years ago, they were all cooperating during the '08 crisis. All the central banks were cooperating, all the prime ministers and presidents were cooperating, but, Trump, under Trump, it's the hell with you all, let's go it alone, and whether they'll find a level of cooperation, whether the banks, whether the financial establishment will demand that imperialist governments cooperate more, well, that's part of the political struggle. But now it's sort of like that, we're competing with everybody, not just China, who they'd like to crush, but everybody, Europe, everybody, that's a new development, and it's not just Trump. It represents a section of the ruling class that says, well, all this cooperation, for the 80 years since we won the second imperialist war, well, it did some good, but it's not doing any good anymore. It doesn't help us. So let's go back to just stabbing each other and beating each other and taking off the gloves, So this is a struggle that's going on in the ruling class, and Trump represents one part of the ruling class, as opposed to those who want to, support the imperialist global institutions and all that stuff, and cooperate more. This, of course, means we can expect an escalation of the war on the workers and the oppressed. It will come in many ways. Up until now, the issues that we've been fighting around, Medicare for all, cancel the student loans, the whole question of the growing inequality that's always been there, but has never been greater than it is today. Though that's been the developments that has radicalized, particularly young workers, but not just young workers. But now with this new economic crisis, it's very likely that you're going to get some other things coming. Layoffs, mass layoffs, more austerity, more homelessness, people starving, people who live paycheck to paycheck and don't have $500 in the event of an economic emergency, just being pushed off a cliff. There'll be more and more of that on a global basis. Although it's important to note, and I think we'll probably be paying a lot of attention to this initially, and rightfully so, it'll be the demands of the working class that come out of the crisis of the virus, for health care, for paid sick leave, for not being evicted, not losing your home, not losing your health care. Those are the kind of things that we're going to be fighting around, I think, very soon, if indeed we're able to have demonstrations, with the health crisis. As Marxists, and not just any Marxists, revolutionary Marxists, which means that we're not just interested in theory, we're interested in putting theory into practice. and ultimately were interested in revolution. And while it may not be the case at the time, this kind of worldwide development can and will create a revolutionary crisis, an opportunity for the workers and the oppressed, in the same way that it did in the 1930s around the world. And we don't need to go over what happened in Europe or what happened here. You know, that's good. It's actually very important to go over that, but that's not the purpose of my remarks. But it's good to have that because, you know, while history doesn't repeat itself 100%, there's always differences because it's different developments and things are bigger and or whatever. There's an aspect of it that repeats itself. And some of the political crises that are going to be developing for the working class and for the vanguard, meaning the revolutionaries, those in the working class movement who are trying to lead it out of capitalism towards revolution, they're going to be the same issues that faced the socialist and communist parties, the revolutionary movement, and the entire working class during that incredible historic period, 80 or so years ago. And I'm optimistic. I say that to preface, I'm optimistic that as revolutionaries, we will, however long it takes, get our act together. We will find a way to minimize unimportant, insignificant differences. A small thinking, sectarianism, whatever constitutes an obstacle to the kind of unity and the kind of revolutionary vision required for the future, for really taking the road to revolution. I'm optimistic that we'll get there. But I must say that I'm sober about it as well, and I'm apprehensive because the working class movement is weak, ideologically, organizationally, and we have not, I'm not just speaking for our party, about our party, we have not been preparing for this. And it will be a learning curve where the revolutionary movement will be trying to catch up to the level of the global crisis. And it will take a very, very serious and determined effort on the part of anyone in the world movement who is serious and determined, including Workers' World Party. So I leave you with what really is the main thing. I mean, we can talk about what's happening in the markets, what other aspects of the economy that it's affecting, what you're hearing from co-workers and family and neighbors. And that's very important because that's how a revolutionary organization informs itself. It's a very important part of it. But at the end of the day, for us as serious revolutionaries, it's the question. It's the question. Will the working class and the movement, the political movement and its organizations, be able to rise to the occasion? What will they have to do? How will they have to change in order to rise to the occasion?